Welcome to the Remarkable Life Podcast. I'm your host and coach, joined by another coach today. Amy Green Smith is here to talk about fear, the thing we all have and don't always want to acknowledge that has a lot to teach us. So, Amy, before we dive in, will you introduce yourself to my listeners?
Sure. So I go by Amy Green Smith. All of those names are spelled the basic bitch way. Nothing exciting. And sort of what I do in my corner of the internet is kind of a hybrid of an internal element and an external element. So the internal piece is teaching women or those who are femme presenting how to really anchor into their intrinsic value, their worthiness, their enoughness, believing that they matter. And we have sort of an array of vernacular around that. And then the external component of, okay, if I do believe that I matter, if I do believe that I'm enough, how does that inform my relationships and the subsequent communication therein? So, what does it look like to speak up for yourself or to have a difficult conversation or to say no without being riddled with guilt? What does an anatomy of a boundary look like? How do I even figure out where I need to establish boundaries? So, that has all very much been informed by sort of my own path and my own journey of finding my voice and then being able to actually use it and creating systems and structures and phrases and tools and tactics where that's a very linear process, because I find, and I'm sure you do too, that in the personal development space, we oftentimes will use blanket niceties like just believe in yourself or you are enough. And people are like, well, okay, great. I'll get right on that.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad you posted that meme. Now it's all clear. And so I find that having very tactical ways to approach personal development is something that a lot of people are hungry for, and it's how I learn, so I can tend to teach the way I learn as well.
Makes sense. Good. Okay, cool. And just I think it's fun to share. The first coach training that I did was at CTI, and you and I are both
Mhm.
certified professional coactive coaches for whatever that's
That's
worth
right.
to anybody's listening. But
Yes.
it's fun to have someone on here who has some of the same training and background that I do. When did you go
Yeah.
through that training?
Well, I was listening to your episode where you were talking about reading the book Coactive Coaching,
Yeah.
and I was going, "Oh my gosh, yes, we're totally aligned in that way." I think I went probably in '04 or '05,
Yeah.
so a good 20 years ago, and I think you and I are pretty close in that.
Hmm.
Um, and then officially started my business in '09, and then was solely doing coaching and not any other day job in 2011. So
Awesome.
it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. That's fun. So you're one of the grandma coaches too.
That's right.
All right.
Seasoned.
Yes. Seasoned. I like Jen Kem called herself a seasoned chicken.
I
Yeah.
like it.
So I want to talk about fear and
Mhm.
how fear comes up and where we get stuck, or how do we even talk about fear in a way that's helpful? Because I know that just the word itself sometimes has people be like, that's not for me.
Yeah, and it is though.
Yes.
Because I think that there is only one documented case that I know of a woman who existed without a fear response. And it was incredibly detrimental. And she would kind of just walk into all these dangerous situations, like walking into the middle of traffic, because nothing registered as a threat or as a danger. So I think that, again, in the personal development landscape, we get certain words like people pleasing or perfectionism or fear, where we kind of go, oh, those are always bad or always wrong. And I think there's a lot more nuance, and fear is absolutely one of them because it's a part of our primitive makeup and the way in which we stay safe as humans. So I think that there's a way to kind of make friends with fear and realize that it's a message. It's showing you, hey, we need to be on high alert. Is this actually dangerous, or is this just new? Because in so many situations, our fear response will sound and it'll be on high alert just at the face of a new experience. So, for example, if I am going into a speaking event, let's say, and I'm going on stage, I'm probably going to have some fear. And what I love to do in those situations is talk to my fear response. Because what's happening is my body is going, this is a new audience, this is a new stage, this is a new situation. Are you sure we're safe? Let's send in all these defense mechanisms, the sweaty palms, the racing heart, the dry throat. And it's going, we're preparing you for survival. So I will talk to myself and go, oh, thank you, sweet pea. Thank you so much for coming to my rescue. Thank you for being prepared. We're actually not in imminent danger. It just feels like we are because this is brand new. And that process is simply distracting my mind. It's giving myself something else to be thinking about besides the inner critic coming in and going, oh my gosh, you're going to fail. You're going to fall flat on your face. You're going to this, you're going to that, which is also trying to keep us safe by keeping us staying the same, not doing anything that's new or seemingly dangerous. So one of the things to really look at when you are in the throes of fear is, am I actually in danger? And that could be physical, emotional, etc. Or is this just new? And that is going to dictate how we handle those situations. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of we have such a conflation of familiarity and comfort. Like just because something is familiar to you does not mean it's actually comfortable for you. But so often we stay in really uncomfortable situations because they're familiar. And what you're saying is when you go do new things and push out of your comfort zone because you want to, because you're welcoming it in, it will have that discomfort of unfamiliarity, but that doesn't mean anything's wrong.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Because when we have certain sets of experiences, like in our youth or in our childhood, we will make associations with things that become either known or unknown, right? So our mind will say, let's, for example, say that you grew up in a really volatile household where maybe one of your primary caregivers was very abusive or abused a substance, and you learned to create a positive association with people pleasing because it kept you safe. So you
Mhm.
were able to acquiesce and kind of walk on eggshells, nothing to see here, fly under the radar. Let me learn how to take care of everyone else's needs in front of myself. And that was quite literally what kept you alive and kept you safe. So that has now become anchored into the subconscious mind as a belief. People pleasing keeps me safe. It's easier for me to survive if I just make everyone else more important. And then we get to some sort of situation that bumps up against that, where we start to see where it's no longer keeping us safe, but rather stealing our joy. So perhaps it is really wanting to go after something, start a business, or try to write a book or land a new client. And you are getting in your own way because you're so worried about what other people are going to think, or my parents don't think I have a real job, or,
Mhm.
whatever it might be that you're realizing, oh, okay, I'm placing so much importance on the opinions of other people. So I think that's an important thing to recognize, is that whatever our defense mechanism has been thus far, whether it's people pleasing, perfectionism, control, overworking, high achieving, reaching burnout, we're usually doing that not just for the fuck of it. We're doing it because there's an association in the subconscious that this is how I survive.
Mhm. How do you, so I mean, to me, this is like, these are all trauma responses in one way or
Mhm.
another, right? So
That's right.
how do you work with people in a way that is healthy and helpful? Like there's that line of like, do I need to go process trauma or do I need to work through
Mm.
with tools to get over fear and people pleasing? Like, how do you find that line and help people understand like this is safe to do versus maybe go get some therapy and then come back?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, one of the first things that I check in with people about, or teach people in order to help them navigate some of this, is around emotional intelligence. Because I believe a lot of what you are feeling, even a sense of fear, is a message. It's helping you discern something that needs attention. So if somebody is in a heightened emotional state, meaning full of rage, or about to cry, or feeling so overwhelmed you feel like you're just going to snap, in those situations I think it's being called for to work through the emotion or give the emotion some sort of attendance. Now, of course, there are deviations from that, but what I find not helpful is layering on personal development tools like positive self-talk, or trying to give yourself mantras, or like this too shall pass, or you're a bad bitch, or whatever you say to yourself. And that's kind of like putting a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. And what we really need is acute care. And depending on your level of emotional stability, that's going to depend. So I really try to make sure, if there's anybody that I'm working with who has severe anxiety, depression, things like that, that they are also being treated by another professional that is out of my scope of practice.
Right.
But I also believe in being trauma informed and
Yeah.
knowing exactly how you are handling things with folks. Um, so that tends to be my barometer: is the emotion super potent? If it is, then it's probably calling for some sort of an emotional release. And
Hmm.
that can look a ton of different ways. If it's sadness, I will encourage people to do what I call controlled emoting, where you are in a very safe environment. You don't have to go be on a Zoom call, or give a presentation, or do anything with work, or be there for your kids. And you just kind of lock yourself in a room, watch a video that's going to make you cry, and
Hmm.
allow yourself to just emote and get through it, allow it to pass through you. Anger releases are another one, which are oftentimes very coincided with anxiety releases, where you can beat up your bed, or have old pieces of paper that you rip up, or scribbling furiously, doing some nervous system regulation type of things in order to get you through the potency of that, before you layer on the tools, before you then sit and journal, before you then look for the learning, or start speaking, positive mantras to yourself. Otherwise, you are just talking yourself out of your humanity.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And your real experiences that are true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not really in a culture that applauds that.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with the study that Brene Brown did around her recent book for Atlas of the Heart.
Hmm.
And she polled, I want to say it was something like 17,000 individuals, something with a seven in it.
Hmm.
That's all I can remember. Um, but on average, she said, how many emotions can you name? The average was
That's
three
horrifying.
emotions that people could name. And they were
Yeah.
mad, glad, and sad.
Right.
And so her whole come from is this idea that if we don't have the vernacular, the vocabulary to adequately address and name what we're experiencing, how the hell are we going to advocate for our needs, or
Hmm.
express what is important to us, or engage in our relationships really thoughtfully? So that is a huge element that I think we have to talk about before we even dig into a lot of the typical, personal development tools.
Yeah. And I'll put the link for Atlas of the Heart in the show notes because it's a beautiful book. It's also
Mhm.
really like just reading through one feeling a night is kind of a nice come down from the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So people pleasing is something that we're seeing a lot on Instagram and people are talking about it. And so we have this language, but what are all the things that are tying into people pleasing? What are we maybe missing because we're
Mm.
just self-diagnosing ourselves as people pleasers and thinking that's bad and that we should be different? But like what are people missing when that's the case?
Ooh, so much stuff here. Well, first of all, I think we need to talk about some of the iterations of our primitive fear responses. So there are certain defense mechanisms that we've had since, primitive humans. We've all heard of fight, flight, freeze, and now there's sort of a newer one in the conversation, which is fawn. Well, all of those looked a very specific way when we did not have sort of the modern stress cycle that we have, where we're through no fault of our own, kind of indoctrinated into being in a sympathetic nervous system state almost all the time. Meaning we're not resting. Our nervous system isn't resting, which is why I think autoimmune issues are on the rise, and burnout and adrenal fatigue and all of that stuff is happening in epic proportions.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these ways in which we would engage with fear in the past now have these sort of modern iterations. So fight, for example, if we were about to engage with a mountain lion, let's say, and we opted to want to fight to get through that, that has now morphed into modern anxiety situations where we might want to really fight an aggressor or a boss who's being, really overbearing. We might want to fight against, but we can't really do that. And so it will morph into sort of an anxious experience. Flight, the need to run away, has now morphed into modern day depression. So this is also why it's very common that folks will, in the throes of depression, will want to sleep. They will want to run away. Let me just get out of this
Right out.
situation at all possible. Freeze, it shows up in a ton of different ways, but one way it can show up now is through procrastination. That it's just there's so much overload, and all I can do is just stand there. And people will say sometimes I'll walk over to the fridge, open up the fridge, and just stand there. And usually those folks have a shit ton on their plate, and their nervous system has not been able to adjust to not being in a state of warding off a bunch of threat. Now, fawn comes into the mix. So if this is a mountain lion, the way that I might try to escape that threat might be like, here, kitty, 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 here's some meat, go over there. Or like, it's placating, it's acquiescing, it is telling somebody what they want to hear, which is modern day people pleasing. So why this is really important is we have to recognize that we will sometimes employ people pleasing in order to stay safe.
Yeah.
Like I was mentioning with your family of origin. But this can happen for anyone who's in a marginalized identity or an intersection therein.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I identify as a queer woman, cis woman, and if I am in a situation that is heavily activated against the queer community, that's probably physically unsafe for me to stand up and wave a rainbow flag and get going about legislation and shit like that. I
Mm-hmm.
might not be safe. That might be the time for me to be like, yeah, haha, oh yeah, go, yeah, fuck them, and like
Right.
walk away in order to stay safe, right?
Right.
I think most women out there know what that's like with men. We know what we
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to say so that we can stay safe. So that's really, really important to underline, because so often we think, okay, it's bad no matter what. And that's not necessarily the case, especially when we're talking about our livelihood and our work worlds. So one of the things that I will ask people to start getting curious about is, am I people pleasing out of self-preservation, or am I people pleasing because I'm offloading or outsourcing my self-worth?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very different motivating factor. It's one thing to be like, okay, I need my boss to like me because I really need that raise, because I really need to, pay my mortgage, blah, blah, blah. That's coming from a place of self-preservation. If it's, I need my boss to like me, or I need to land this client or whatever, so that I feel that I'm valuable, or that I have proof that I'm enough, or that I'm worthy, now we are outsourcing our self-worth. And that's a very different motivating factor. So it's
Right.
checking in with yourself of what is motivating that behavior.
Yeah. So having a level of intention and thoughtfulness with your own life and why you do what you do. Yeah.
Yes. And I also think it's worth exploring even the moniker of people pleasing. Because I don't know about you, but I find a lot of high achieving women don't identify with that term. But
Right. Yeah.
if I say, yeah, but how much do you care about what other people think? How invested are you in the opinions of others? They're like, oh, constantly.
Yeah. Right. All day
And I'm
long.
like, congratulations. That's
Right.
people pleasing. So the way that I look at it is any way that I am showing up in an inauthentic manner in order to make other people happy or to put others in front of myself. And it's not just an arbitrary exercise of learning how to speak up for yourself. It is because your self-worth is dependent on that. Every time you choose to silence yourself or not speak up or not establish a boundary, you are sending a subconscious message to your own mind that what you want just doesn't matter as much as somebody else. And you have that chronically, cyclically, that is going to anchor in a message, just everyone else matters more. That's worthiness. That's enoughness. I just don't matter as much. So then no wonder it's difficult to get your business off the ground. No
Mhm.
wonder it's difficult to write that proposal or create a new business alliance or go to that networking event. No fucking wonder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
I
notice.
think it's mandatory.
Yeah. And I noticed that in a number of these cases, you're using your own voice to talk to yourself in a kind of nurturing way. And I'm just wondering how much of that is something that you're working on with clients. Like when you get into these spaces
Mhm.
where you realize, I'm doing this on purpose. I wish I weren't doing this. And I'm going to keep doing it. Like how are you working with people on how to talk to themselves around that?
Yeah, so I tackle things kind of in a four-prong approach. Um, that is somewhat of a model that I kind of use all of my work kind of funnels into. And so I focus on the internal elements of your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. And then the external elements of your behavior, what are you actually doing? And then what your environment looks like. Who are you surrounded by? So when we look at all of those different quadrants, those are the things that will actually inform and change belief. So if we're talking about conscious tools, I'm a huge fan of mirror work. So in one portion of my program, we'll go through re-engineering new belief statements, usually about 10 or so of belief statements. And there's usually an overarching one of I am enough, I am good.
Mhm.
By the way, if you have extreme religious upbringing, it's highly likely that there's something around goodness. I see that a ton about like, I'm just a bad, flawed human.
Right.
Uh, so now I lost my train of thought. Damn it. Damn it,
The quadrant
perimenopause.
and what you work with,
Oh,
and then the
thank
beliefs.
you. I'm always forever blaming it on perimenopause.
It's real.
Um, oh my God. So the other internal element then is the subconscious mind, which is where my hypnotherapy and hypnosis comes into play. So I usually will do a subliminal hypnosis track, which is one of the easiest ways to start changing beliefs. Because if it sounds just like music, it's designed to bypass the conscious faculty of the mind and helps it drop into the subconscious easier without the kickback from the inner critic going, this is stupid. You're never going to, oh, how cute, you're playing personal development. Oh,
Right.
you think you can do that. Oh. And so without that kickback, it's a lot easier for it to drop into the subconscious. So we sort of do a hybrid of those two, where we'll work with a hypnotic modality, but then also conscious exercises like mirror work, saying your beliefs over and over. But there are a lot of ways that I think traditional mantras and such are set up to take people kind of from A to Z as opposed to A to wherever the fuck they are.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I use a lot is something that I've coined progressive language. So instead of saying something like I am enough or I am capable of building this business, saying something like I'm exploring what enoughness looks like, or I'm actively committed to becoming a powerful business owner, something where we're in action toward that thing. Now, if you can say, I am enough, or I love who I am, I love my body, I'm capable, whatever, knock
Yeah.
yourself out, say it all damn day. But what we're looking for is something that will create consistency, because usually what happens is we try to say something powerful to ourselves, and the inner critic kicks in so hard that we throw in the towel. And mantras will work. They absolutely will work, but we usually can't get past the kickback. And so we say, forget it. It's taking too long. I'm not going to do this, which is why I like sort of the tandem element of hypnosis with conscious work. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the major framework, I guess, of how I help people work on changing these beliefs. And I would say too, for anyone listening, you can create a progressive language statement for yourself right now. So if there's something that really hurts, like my relationship to my body, or building my business, or getting a promotion, or my parenting, figure out what it is that you've been saying to yourself. Think about what you would rather believe. You don't have to believe it now. But if you like the idea of believing, I am capable of establishing powerful boundaries. If you like that idea, then you're on the right track. Now, all we just need to do is put something progressive on the beginning part of that.
Hmm.
Like, I'm exploring what it looks like, or I'm actively working on establishing powerful boundaries.
Hmm.
I'm re engineering, I'm recreating, I'm mapping out. Anything like that can help you feel like, okay, I'm on my way. And there's a
Right.
little bit of motivation behind it too.
Yeah. It doesn't have that feeling of like, I can't do that. It's just blowing smoke. Like you can't get past those inner critics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So you mentioned earlier this idea that we're all in this state of basically our nervous systems are aroused all the time. I'm wondering how you recommend folks to get into the parasympathetic state. Like, do you talk about doing this on a daily basis, or how do you
Mm.
think about
Well, and just a little warning, no one's going to like this answer.
it? Good.
No one's going to like this answer. And it is because we are in a capitalist society, is one element of it, that highly, highly values production.
Hmm.
So at least if you're, in the US, I can speak to that. So we are not a culture where rest is applauded. In fact, we glorify busyness. We glorify not needing much sleep. And we don't at all emphasize the importance of rest or play or white space or downtime, so much so that when we do have downtime, we're fidgety and we're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do?
Hmm.
And the solution here is more white space, is actually taking your paid time off, taking your unpaid time off. And I recognize that comes from a place of privilege, but something has to give. And I'm reminded of the top 5 regrets of the dying. Are you
Mm.
familiar with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So really huge blog post that went viral, I guess, by viral standpoint in like the early aughts,
Hmm.
but then was turned into a book by a woman named Brony Ware. And so she compiled these 5 regrets of the dying that she found as she worked at about 8 years, I think, in palliative care. And regardless of background, sexual orientation, race, creed, whatever, there were these prevailing regrets. And let me tell you, none of them were, I wish I would have killed myself more at work. I wish I would have laid down my life more at work
Yeah.
and worked harder. None of them are that way. In fact, one of them is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had allowed myself to feel the feelings that I had, right? Talking about emotional intelligence, because everything that we do, every box we're checking, we're doing it because of something we think it's going to make us feel,
Hmm.
whether we feel accomplished, we feel free. How many people do you know who say, I'm motivated by freedom, right? Like
Yeah.
we want to feel
Yeah.
free. We want to feel expansive. And so we're always chasing an emotion, but oftentimes we're doing it through a means that's not going to allow us to actually get there. Um, yeah, but some of the other regrets are, I wish that I would have spent more time with my friends and family. Um, I wish I would have lived a life according to what I wanted instead of what everyone else wanted, right?
Right.
So we have all of this great data, this great scientific data that folks at the end of their life are not saying, I wish I would have worked harder. So I think we need to actually learn from that. And I'm such a firm believer that we'll be presented with the same challenges over and over again until we learn the damn lesson.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, to circle back to what we were talking about earlier, I think our bodies are stopping us. I think our bodies are going, bitch, if you're not going to slow down, I'm going to make you slow down. Boom, here's autoimmune. Boom, here's burnout. Now you're
Mm.
in permanent freeze. You cannot move. So I think also disproportionately as women, we are used to taking on burdens that are not our responsibility, taking care of everyone else's emotional state, constant self-sacrifice, and that being also applauded. And
Mhm.
finally, that is starting to change a little bit more. Um, but I think recognizing that, yeah, some of these systems are set up for us to feel really bad about taking rest and downtime. Um, but it's truly about laying those burdens down. And I've thought about this too when I've had white space and rest space, but my mind is not laying any burdens down. It's telling me, oh, if you have this time, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And so one of the things
Right.
that I oftentimes will do is say, okay, in the grand scheme of Amy Smith's life, how important is it that I clean the garage right now or that I finish that one damn task?
Right.
No, my 90-year-old self is going to be like, yeah, girl, take that nap.
Hmm.
Yeah, rest, connect, commune with your friends and your colleagues and with nature and do the things that light you up. Um, but it does take a real strong stance and fuck you to capitalist culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like how you're saying it. Take that rest because it's not going to generally be handed over to you.
No, no.
Yeah.
And if you are a high achiever and you are tend to be somebody who doesn't speak up about how difficult that is, usually the folks on the other side will think a couple of things. One is, oh, that's easy for Caryn. Like, oh, that's super easy for her. Or she loves doing it. Or I'm sure if there was an issue, she would have said something.
Right. Yeah.
That's the natural logic. It's not necessarily that people are running all over you out of malice. Sometimes it's because you've sold that story.
You're so well. They believe you.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. That I believe.
Yeah. So you have to fight for that. And I will even say, like, I hope that I make it look easy. I really do, but here's what you need to know. I can't take on one more thing. I am at my limit and I truly hope you can understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So take that rest. Take that rest.
Yeah, own it, claim it.
Yeah. What's your big hope for your clients when you do this work and put yourself out there? Like what do you want for your people?
My first gut instinct is that they're anchored into their worth. I feel like that is the nucleus from which every other piece of growth stems. That's how
Hmm.
we learn how to engage in relationships, what we will and won't tolerate, if friendships, romantic relationships, familial relationships. But it also creates a ripple effect. It creates a difference in how we show up for all of the subsequent generations, for them to see like, oh, powerful women truly owning and taking up goddamn space, taking up space physically. Like you don't have to shrink your body to be valuable. You're
Right.
valuable right now to take up space vocally, spiritually, emotionally. I'm so fucking done with this idea that being emotional is somehow weak. I'm like, this, are you kidding me? It is a motherfucking superpower.
Right.
So
Yeah.
That is the thing. Anchor into your self-worth and take up some goddamn space.
Okay. Who's the right person to work with you? Clearly, they're wanting some of that action.
Yeah. Uh, Thank you for asking that. I would say probably women who are a bit type A, who are very high achievers, but do tend to struggle with people pleasing and or being highly invested in the opinions of other people, who have isolated, feeling like no one is uniquely broken the way I am. Like, sure, everyone else can figure it out, but no, I really am not enough, Amy. I really am not worth. You don't understand.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Those feeling uniquely broken.
Mm-hmm.
And those who have a tendency to want to perfect everything, to gain and outsource again that worth or enoughness through being perfect. And that usually shows up in extreme accomplishment. Um, yeah, those are my ladies.
Awesome. All right. And one thing I like to ask people is like, what makes a remarkable life for you?
I mean, kind of coming full circle for me, it is all about emotion. And so it comes down to feeling expansive, free, happy, lit up, joyful, blissful, enjoying ecstasy. I really truly think women enjoying pleasure in all forms is remarkable. To let yourself have orgasms, to let yourself like sugar for Christ's sake, to let yourself say, I like being wealthy, to have fun, to enjoy pleasure, like just pleasure in all of its
Mhm.
forms. I'm such a huge advocate for that as
Yeah.
another way in which we can take up space. So I think that is what I'm always looking for. Success to me is an emotion. It's how do I feel? And I want that to be on the happy side of the emotion spectrum. Um, but then also the uncomfortable emotions, looking at those as messaging and going, what is this telling me? How do I call in the things that will move me towards how I do want to feel? Um, yeah,
Yeah. Love it. And thank you for sharing all of it. And
yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
put links to all your stuff in the show notes, but do you want to just share one place where people could find you?
Yes, my corner of the internet, again, all basic bitch spellings, amygreensmith.com. It's kind of the hub of all the things. And I always say I hang out the most on Instagram, like any self-respecting Gen Xer, if you're looking for social platforms. And my handle is always, hey, Amy Greensmith. But
Cool.
yeah, come get some freebies on the site.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing and thank you for being here and for doing this work to help women take up more space.
Oh, I appreciate you allowing me to come here and yell into the microphone for a half an hour. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you again, Amy, for being with us today. And just notice what out of our conversation speaks to you. What's here for you now? Was there an invitation in there? Just see. And if you want the links for the book we mentioned or to go find Amy in all the places, those will be in the show notes. And the other thing I want to invite you to is 30 days of powerful questions with me, coaching journey, where I will be in your inbox for 30 days, getting you from where you are now to clarity about what's next. That is totally free for you to do. A little complimentary coaching from me to you. All right. Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you soon.